Hey guys, Gregory here. Today we're going to be talking about strumming, the correct strumming technique to make your strumming feel lighter and sound better. So what I think I'll do in this video is I'll just stick to the technique alone and give you some reasons why you may want to strum in a particular way. And then I might go a little bit more in depth in some things you can do to kind of work on these ideas a bit more. So let's go. So to begin with, we need to understand the parts of the hand that we use to strum. So strumming generally comes from two motions. It comes from the movement of the forearm through the elbow, and it also comes from the rotation of the forearm. And strumming should be a combination of these two things, but mostly from the forearm. So let's talk about them separately first. Okay, so like I said earlier, strumming really comes from two movements. The movement of the forearm through the elbow like this, and then there's also the rotation of the forearm like this. So I'm going to start with this movement here, the movement of the forearm through the elbow. Now, there aren't many advantages of strumming like this alone. The first one I can think of is you can get a lot of volume if you really put your arm into it. That's a good advantage. But the second one that I can think of, if you are performing, it could look kind of cool to put your whole arm into a strum. But those are the only two advantages I could really think of from strumming this way. In terms of disadvantages now, this type of strum alone at least gives us a very linear approach to these strings, the pick hitting the strings. So naturally speaking, a flat pick going straight down would give us a kind of, but it will give us a lot of resistance to begin with for the pick to go through. And naturally it gives us a harsher tone because of that resistance. Okay, so that's disadvantage number one. Now we could alleviate that by angling the pick upward and then strumming down, but that kind of is involving this movement here, and we'll talk about that later. So the second disadvantage is it's harder to strum from a particular string or to strum a certain group of strings on the guitar. So say for example, we're playing a D major, right? D major should start from the fourth string. It's kind of hard to strum from the fourth string constantly if we're just strumming using the arm. It takes a lot of movement and it's just kind of hard to do. All right, so we leave that there. The third disadvantage that I can think of is it takes a lot of energy, especially if we're doing faster strums, to use the arm like this over and over. Okay, it takes a lot and it's really not good for strumming fast. And the fourth disadvantage I can think of is strumming from the arm like this, the elbow, really displaces the hand from the strings. So if you were doing a strum that involved strumming and picking notes, right? Now, I kind of use both movements there. But if you were doing that kind of thing, if you were to strum down and you really need to get your pick back to a string, that is a lot of wasted movement to do, okay? So that's a big disadvantage if you want to start to combine strumming and playing lead guitar. Okay, so let's talk now about strumming exclusively from the rotation of the forearm like this. The disadvantages that I can think of, there's only one. It's a bit difficult to strum, let's say 5 or 6 strings over and over using this kind of movement because the range of this rotation here is just not really suited for that wide of a strum. Okay, in terms of advantages now, because of the angle of strumming that we get when we use this movement, we tend to strum in sort of an arc. Whereas when we use the arm, the elbow, we get more of a kind of linear vertical strum. The arc generally kind of gives us a better approach to strumming where we would more naturally get a gentler sound. And that's because the pick is angled away from the strings when we strum. So that would generally give us a gentler tone as opposed to a flat pick going straight down, which is what we get when we use the elbow, right? So that's advantage number one. The second advantage is that it becomes a bit easier to target certain strings. And that's also because of this same arc. If I wanted to strum a C major, for example, let's say I wanted to hit the bottom 2 strings of a C major over and over, right? Because of the angle of the strings there, it becomes a little easier to kind of target those strings over and over. Now I'll make a separate video kind of going a bit more in depth in how to practice this kind of thing. But let's move on. So the third advantage that we get is it's just a lot easier to strum. It takes a lot of effort to do this than to do this from the elbow. So if we had a strumming pattern that was fast, and let's say a song that was long, you tend to last a lot longer from strumming this way, okay? And those are your advantages and disadvantages of this type of movement. Now, like I said before, strumming should be a combination of those two things. So let's talk about that. Okay, so let's talk about the actual technique. What should it be like? Like I said before, it should be a combination of both movements, the elbow moving the forearm and the rotation of the forearm. Now, the rotation of the forearm is really good for strumming, let's say 3 to 4 strings. So if I were playing a D major, for example, I may use exclusively just the rotation of my arm. But if I wanted to strum a G major, then I need to extend the range of this a little bit. And so I just need a little bit of movement from my elbow with the rotation of my arm, and it would look something like this. I would just strum very slowly. So you can see there, I am rotating my arm, and my elbow is moving very slightly. It's not moving a whole lot at all. It's just helping to extend the range of this movement here, right? And that is really how you want to strum. Spend more time practicing this type of movement because this is really the meat of your strumming here. Okay, so that was the lesson. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. It will help me out a lot. And like I said earlier in the video, I may do a follow-up lesson on this to kind of go a little bit in depth on some of the things you can get out of strumming from this technique. But until next time, goodbye.